For this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to create a basic chart with Chartopia. If you go to the navigation menu at the top, you can see a create chart option, and you're presented with, by default, a D12 random table, and we have 12 rows, of which you have the option to create titles, some extra metadata, and there's a bunch of rendering extra metadata options that we can add to it. So being the Star Wars fan that I am, I'm going to create a Star Destroyer random table just to demonstrate some of the aspects that go into making a random table. So if I was to create an Imperial 1 class Star Destroyer, you may notice that as I enter it, we have inferred rows. So with Chartopia, if you select a D12 table and you populate the first row, it's going to imply that every row after that is also going to adopt the same value. So if you test roll now, it's rolling on a D12 and we always get an Imperial 1 class Star Destroyer. However, if I put an Imperial 2 class destroyer, it will now weight the results heavily towards rows 2 through to 12. And if we test roll, you'll see that we'll primarily get an Imperial 2 class Star Destroyer, and eventually you should get a 1. There it is. Good. Now, as you make changes, you get an autosave. You can explicitly kick off the autosave if you wish. Now, it's important to remember that these changes are local to this particular chart editing session. If you want the other users to see it, you have to publish the chart. So for example, if I was to exit out of the editor and view your charts, you'll notice that it still comes up as untitled and it comes up as an empty table, and that's because by default it's an empty D12 table. I can go back to editing that, I can publish it, and if I return back to my charts, you'll then see that these changes have been applied, and now the other users can now roll on your table, assuming that you've of course changed the visibility to public, so I'll mention that later. So back to editing it. We have some extra metadata options, so no need to fill it out for this demonstration. So bear with me as I populate the rest of these rows. Okay, so I've populated the random table and I now have 10 rows. So because of that, I can shrink my random table down to a D10 and we don't have any superfluous rows. You test roll it, and now we have a much more varied selection of Star Destroyers to choose from. If I was to add a column, this is a good way of perhaps having a bit of a description about the main item to the left, but we don't really need it. It's a good way to add things like images or URLs to Wikipedia, for example, if I want to have a bit more explanation about some of these Star Destroyers, but I don't need that. To the left here, we've got a few extra options that are important to explain. Visibility is a little bit like, exactly like YouTube's visibility settings. If you set it to private, only you can search for your random tables and roll on them. If you set it to unlisted, it means that you can share the URL with others. It also means that anyone can link to your random tables, but it won't show up in any search engine. If you set it to public, it means it's going to show up on the public search, people can link to it, and it's for everyone there to use. The adding images, I've got an image standing by. It's a good way to add a bit of cover art to your random table, makes it a little bit more attractive. Obviously you want to cite your sources. It's always a good idea to know where you've got it from. Sometimes you source them from blogs or from books, so it's good to know where you've got them from. Tags help the search engine out a little bit. So for example, we could go Star Wars and ships, and that's a good way to help hunt down that random table once your collection gets pretty big. In regards to dice roll render style, this is a little helper way of changing the rendering options. So for example, at the moment as a nested list, if I was to do a test roll, you get the title and the content to show up. However, if if I was to make this as a sentence, it will try and render this in line. So now you notice it's all somewhat linear. Likewise, if I took out the column names, we will get no columns, and it will just be the result by itself. Those are some basic options. There is a lot more you can do with the rendering, but again, there will be a subsequent video about templates and then rolling on subcharts and columns of subcharts, things like that, and how you can use Markdown to make much richer text formatting of your result. But that's a future video. But for now, this is essentially how to create your first random table in Chartopia. So if we were to exit out of this now, we didn't publish. Let's see if it's all there. If I go to mine, we have Star Destroyer. Now, notice that because I didn't press publish and I did make some changes, you may notice that we do get some helper flags just to remind you that you got some unsaved changes. But if we roll on this, we have our roll as a sentence with column names results for a random table.